Hi, this is James Melendez, James, a wine guy, and today we're going to just talk about wine content on a wine label. And I thought that's a really important way to talk about this specific subject as opposed to design. That's another video or videos plural. And I got the inspiration actually from looking at some books I have, and it was really a little bit of a pedantic smackdown, which was here is how to read a wine label. And I just thought, it felt uncomfortable. I'm like, as if nobody's ever seen, one of these or, the paper label or etching on a bottle to understand what they have in front of them. So just want to talk about some elements that you see on a wine label that are somewhat either required legally, or maybe there are specific industry standards that are placed on a label, or maybe they're just part of what a specific brand does to the wine that they're presenting to the public, the buying public. So here we go. We have 3 bottles here, and we'll start off with, this is Goose Cross. So one of the elements that's required is the brand name. So this is Goose Cross here. This is a bottle of Schneider Cabernet Franc, yum. And this is Rioja Bordon. And this is an interesting label, and I brought this on specifically because there's a lot of content on the front, which you don't see on every label. And I think it's really one of those essential elements to say, okay, you get a lot of data here. You get a lot of data on the back. It's not all about data, so I don't want to be like this is a technical subject, because it isn't necessarily in terms of just enjoying and seeing what you have at hand. Being in the retail world, I've looked at people and talked to people, what are you looking for? What is it you get from a wine label, or what are you not getting from a wine label that you'd like to have? So we also have some classing designations and vintages. And vintages aren't necessarily required, but it's really a nice thing to have, because imagine, you pick up this bottle and you don't know, I review bottles, but I also include vintage, because that bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc or Tempranillo is going to change over time. And it won't be the Tempranillo that you had last year, will not be the one that you have 5 years from today, or the one that you had from, Gran Reserva 10 years ago. So I think there's elements into that are really important to have, to understand that I heard somebody talk about this wine, here's a vintage, I want that wine. So that's something that is, and if there's no vintage on there, it's not terribly helpful, because you're not sure what did the person review and what is this that I have at hand. So it's not really clear that way. So vintage does go a long way. So you also have elements of, where was this bottled? So in this bottle here, it was bottled in Yountville. So you see that on the back of this label here. This is in Long Island in New York. And this is bottled and produced by Schneider Vineyards and Matic, New York. So you have that on the back. But on this label here, this is Rioja Bordon. And this is interesting because that is the label name, but the producer is the Bodegas Franco Españolas. So it's a different, I wouldn't say this is just a label, and they produce many different brands or labels. Now this says that this is bottled in Logroño, which is the capital of La Rioja, which is the wine region and political region in Spain. So you have that information right on the front, which I think is a cool element. They also have that this is a Rioja wine. So if there's any doubt about that, that's there. You also have net volume. So these, just by eyeballing them, there's 750 milliliters, which I think is another interesting subject unto itself, which is how, say in the United States, we have the metric system for wine and spirits, but not for, say, beer or milk or other liquids, even water. And so you have liters here. And what I find very fascinating about that is the American consumer doesn't even question what a 750 milliliter is, or how much is that, or how many pints is that. I can't imagine having this in terms of pints. It just wouldn't make a lot of sense. And really, it probably stems from importing of wines from Europe, and that the standard was the 750 milliliter. So on this, you also see a requirement for 750 milliliters. You also see maybe nearby, or maybe on the opposite side of a label, you see the alcohol content. So this is 13 and a half. And we're going to look at this, and sometimes they're on the back. This is an interesting label unto itself, because it actually goes around. It's a wraparound, so it's really one label, but it appears to be 2. And so here you definitely have that information, 13% alcohol. And on this label here, you will see it, where is, I think it's in the back. So yeah, 13.8, which is pretty impressive when you think about that. So that's a really interesting way of just looking at a wine label and saying, okay, here's some elements. So, the TTB says this is what has to be here, or maybe it doesn't have to be there in terms of, say, vintage or not having that on there. Another requirement in the United States specifically is a government warning. So this health warning is on all U.S. bottles, so it doesn't matter where it came from. If it's going to be imported and retailed or poured in the United States, it needs a government warning. Now, the United States and Mexico are the only two nation states that require that. And in fact, if you are exporting, say, this wine or this wine, to maybe a European nation, it may be something that a new label is required, or maybe the importer is going to be like, oh, I really don't want that government warning on the back label, so I'm going to cover it up, which is really not aesthetically pleasing either. So I do have a bottle of wine from Mexico. This is F. Chavinet, and it's from the Valle de Guadalupe. And this is a much simpler one. The U.S. government warning is pretty lengthy and it's pretty large in its font style. So in Mexico it says, el abuso en el consumo de este producto es nocivo para la salud. So you have that on the back label. It's very small, and this is just for the Mexican market. It's not for meant for export. So one of my friends brought this back for me. It has a tax stamp on here, and actually there was another stamp here from the state it was passed through. So that's another element. So you see, I'll bring this a little closer so you can see that. So here's the health warning from Mexico on a wine, bottle of wine. And then here is, on this, is the U.S. requirement for a back label on a U.S. bottle of wine. And that goes for importers, have to comply with that as well. So those are some elements you see. So going beyond that, for example, you have regional regulators. So you have in Rioja a stamp here, and the stamp says this is a crianza wine and it's a certification. This comes from Rioja. This is a crianza style wine, so you know exactly what you're getting. I think it's a really attractive system. And then you have some nation states like Austria or Croatia, for example, that they put their flag on the very top. So I'll bring this a little closer here. Let's see if I can get that within range. There we go. So you can see the Croatian flag on that. And because it's a really good marketing effort in terms of the Croatian wine growers. And then you have wine producers. You also have the Croatian flag on the bottom here. So those are some really good things to have. I also really like, and it's not necessarily required that it's a lot of story, because some wines don't have a lot of story. So for example, this is I think it's a private label, and I believe this is from Trader Joe's. I didn't get this. Somebody just gave this to me. And it's a really good example of how this wine has almost no story to it. And it has a mysterious produced and bottled by RE315MU. And I'm not sure who or what that is. So it's telling me this really appears to be a private label. So another element that you got on wines too is like this. You see that this is a kosher wine. The P stands for Passover, so it can be a kosher wine for any Shabbat or for Passover. And what I thought was really clever on this bottle here is you see it says up. And I just thought, okay, so it's on the top, which I think is really cool. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a kosher wine, and it's for Passover. And I thought that was a really nice element to see on a wine label, because it's a clever thing. I think that's really well done. And then you have some nice story copy on some labels here. So this bottle of Schneider Cabernet Franc, gives a specific location where this comes from, which I think is a really helpful thing, because a lot of people don't realize there's a wine region in Long Island, and a very respectable, nice, beautiful region, which I recommend to visit too. So this is just a one-on-one, trying to just really get some content on a wine label. And sometimes you get, the importers. So for example, here you get, this is Vision Wine and Spirits in Secaucus, New Jersey. So you get a little bit of, the producer on the front, you get the importer on the back. And sometimes the importers, in like that one, for example, has, where, a website and location of the importer. Here's another one too. This is a wine from Blue Danube Wine, so you can see on the back here. So on this Croatian bottle, you can glean more information from that. And I think, by the way, it's a gorgeous, really beautiful label too. So again, a lot of information, and really I think what you see now is you see a lot of labels that are going to impart a lot of information. They're also going to direct you to their website or a website about that wine specifically. And in some labels, you'll see a lot of barcodes. And barcodes are not a universal universally accepted way of maybe a retailer receipting in or maybe charging for the bottle of wine because they don't work across the board. And so, for example, here, there is no barcode, and that's because on this label here, Goose Cross, they really are selling to consumer and they do sell to restaurant. And so often you'll see that the barcode is there, but I think you're going to go to things like an ASDA code, which you might see when you get your airplane ticket, when you're going to board a flight, or maybe when you see a QR, quick response. And those are ways of saying, okay, anyone can understand what this is, and eventually you can code that with maybe a price point so that wherever you are, you could get a price point on that, you can get a lot of information, and even a retailer could use that, or maybe use an Aztec code. So for more reviews, please go to jamesthewineguy.com. Please subscribe to my videos on YouTube. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm also on Flickr. So give a look, give a follow, give a like. Thank you, and salute. And we're going to do more videos on specific subjects, say kosher wine, because it's such a huge subject, or design label, or maybe specific other categories that aren't even presented here today. So thank you for listening. Salute.